it will be interesting to see what happens in that space. It does look a little bit messy, but what wasn't messy was the removal of the Prime Minister in terms of the strategic ability to deliver the votes to Malcolm Turnbull and surprise, it has to be said, and surprise the Abbott camp on the way through. One important change vote seems to be Senator Mitch Fifield. Now, he's not in Cabinet. He's responsible for the delivery of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is a big responsibility, but the most significant thing about him walking into that vote as he did alongside Malcolm Turnbull is that he was the manager of government business in the Senate and, of course, still is. Mitch Fifield joins me now live from Canberra. Thanks very much for being there.
Good morning, Peter.
Senator, can I just start by asking what drew you to a change of leader, replicating the removal of a first-term Prime Minister? There are differences, of course, but replicating the fact of removing a first-term Prime Minister is not something that a lot of us, probably you either, thought the Liberal Party would do after what happened with Kevin Rudd.
Well, Peter, as a government, there are things that we wanted to do and still want to do, and that's obviously to cut expenditure, to cut the deficit, to reform the tax system, to grow the economy and create jobs. And we weren't making progress on those fronts and communicating with the electorate what our plan was and what we wanted to ensure. What we couldn't contemplate was the risk of Bill Shorten becoming Prime Minister. So a majority of colleagues, as expressed through the vote in the party room, decided that we needed to change, and that's what happened yesterday.
And that was your view, was it, Senator? Your view was that the risk was just too great that Bill Shorten would win the next election, given how the government was travelling under Tony Abbott's leadership?
Well, that's a risk that a majority of colleagues just could not contemplate. And as I say, we are a government that does have plans. We are a government that does have an agenda, but there were difficulties. It's got to be accepted. It's got to be acknowledged in communicating that to the Australian people, to articulating that we did have a plan, that we did have an agenda, that at a time of uncertainty economically, that they could trust us. So when you're having difficulty communicating those messages, that also compounds in terms of your ability to navigate things through the Parliament. So the view of colleagues was that we needed to change, and look, I think and I know that this is an extremely difficult time for colleagues. It's something that I've found extremely difficult, but we are here in these positions as members of Parliament ultimately to do what we think is the best for the nation, and that's what we've done.
You've talked about colleagues, and obviously a majority of your colleagues wanted to make this change, but just to clarify, you were supporting Malcolm Turnbull, weren't you? You did walk into the room with him along with others such as Scott Ryan and Arthur Sinodinos, White Roy as well.
I did, and look, I believe in being upfront about what you do in ballots. I have been during each ballot that I've been in the party room for. We now have an opportunity to explain to the Australian people in a new way, in a way that's warm, in a way that's embracing, in a way that's inclusive, and there's a tremendous opportunity here for the party and for the government, and I know that my colleagues collectively will seize that.
But how will you ensure that the divisions don't become the story? I mean, I spoke to Senator Cory Bernardi a little bit earlier. He made it clear that he, for one, wouldn't be doing any white-handing, but he seemed to suggest that there is a hell of a lot of animosity in the ranks.
Well, these are difficult decisions for each member of the party room. Party room members genuinely wrestle to determine what is in the best interests of the government, what is in the best interests of the community. And it would be concerning if members of the party room didn't wrestle with these matters. Yes, I acknowledge that there are colleagues who would have preferred a different outcome. But we are an extremely broad tent. As a party, we cover a broad range of perspectives. We're stronger when we have those perspectives together. Corey is a good friend of mine, and on this occasion we reached a different conclusion, but I very much look forward to continuing to work with all my colleagues for our common purpose, which is to create economic growth, to see jobs created, to establish a better and fairer tax system.
Senator, can I just jump in though?
We want to do.
I just want to jump in and ask you about your confidence, I suppose, in Malcolm Turnbull being able to do what Tony Abbott wasn't able to do, and therefore make the shift. Because, of course, it's a really interesting story. You were one of the 3 shadow parliamentary secretaries who signed the letter penning your resignations during Turnbull's first stint as leader at about the same time as this in 2009. It was yourself, it was Brett Mason, he's now enjoying Amsterdam as the ambassador over there. And of course the other one was Matthias Cormann, who is now the finance minister and was one of the key numbers men supporting Tony Abbott yesterday. What shifted you from what you had concerns back then, albeit a long time ago, about Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, in 2009, my issue was fundamentally one of policy. I could not, in good conscience, support an emissions trading scheme before there was comprehensive agreement in the rest of the world. At that time, that was the position of the leader. I couldn't embrace that, so that's why I resigned from the front bench at that time.
Have you got an assurance that that won't change this time, though? Have you got an assurance that that won't be something that Malcolm Turnbull will look at years down the track?
Look, Malcolm fully embraces the policy that we have, and you know, I should make this point that I think anyone who has served as a leader of the party does become a better politician and a better member of parliament by virtue of that service as a leader, even if it wasn't as the incumbent may have liked at that time, and that's true of Malcolm. I certainly hope that I'm a better member of parliament and a better politician than I was in 2009, and I'm certain that Malcolm is.
Multiple sources in the party room have told me that last night the outgoing Prime Minister Tony Abbott was very strong in some of his rhetoric, describing himself as having been cut down, wishing Malcolm Turnbull the best, but saying that I wish you well, but you won't survive were his words, if you face what I faced, talking about white anti, and he also brought Joe Hockey in on the mix. Do you accept those words?
Well, look, I don't comment on matters that occur in the party room, but just in relation to the general point in relation to you know, things like the leaks on occasion. I think when there are leaks in and around the government, that tends to be more a symptom of an underlying problem rather than a cause of the problem. So I just make that point in the broad. But look, it's an extremely difficult time for Tony Abbott as an individual. We as a party, we as members and senators have immense respect for him as a human being, and he has given his all to the nation in the role of Prime Minister. He secured government for us, and there were some good things that occurred under his leadership. So look, you're not going to hear anything other than positive comments about Tony Abbott as an individual. He has served the party and the nation well. What
about Malcolm Turnbull's comments, though, at his media conference yesterday? He did say that he was dismayed, or words to that effect, with the government's approach to the economic challenges of the nation. Joe Hockey was pretty pointed in his response when he did a media statement saying that Malcolm Turnbull has never come to him once to express his concerns in that theatre. Who's right?
Well, the conversations between colleagues are matters for them, and what has happened in the cabinet in terms of discussions about policy is a matter between them. But we have not crafted an economic narrative that conveys successfully to the Australian people the plans that we have. So that is an opportunity that we have to do that. And the decision that has been taken by my colleagues last night, ultimately they represent electorates across the nation, and they, in their decision, are reflecting the views that they've been receiving across the nation. We've heeded that, and we have the opportunity under Malcolm Turnbull as a new Prime Minister to talk to the Australian people about our plan for growth, our plan for jobs, our plan to reform the tax system.
Could the government have won the election, do you think, under Tony Abbott's leadership?
Well, we as a party room could not contemplate the risk of Bill Shorten winning the election. We're determined to ensure that Bill Shorten doesn't. We are doing and have done by our decisions everything we can. Ultimately, we don't want to see Bill Shorten become Prime Minister. We don't want to see Bill Shorten bring back a carbon tax. We don't want to see Bill Shorten dismantle our effective border protection policies. He says he's on board, but the proof is in the pudding, and we know last time Labor formed office, they promised in the lead up to the election that they wouldn't dismantle our border protection policies, and they did. We just can't afford for that to happen.
All right, Senator Mitch Fifield, we know it's a difficult set of circumstances, to say the least. We really appreciate your time here on Newsday. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Pat. Good to be with you.
All right, we're going to go now live to our political reporter, David Lipson, who is at Government House.